After much delay, mayors of the 3 Gauteng Metros have announced their mayoral committees. Now work is to begin for the municipalities to run efficiently. What will the focus for the mayors be in the most contested metros? Joining me now tonight, City of Johannesburg Mayor Dr. Mpho Phalatse and Mayor of Tshwane Randal Williams. And you're a part of the conversation tonight directly to the mayors as far as priorities are concerned. What would you like to hear? Send those questions and comments. Otherwise, we'll take you live tonight on 072 110 5584, or you can tweet us at Newzroom 405. Mayors, good evening, and thank you very much for your time. Madam Mayor, let's begin with you. I mean, the announcement today, alongside leader of the Democratic Alliance, John Steenhuisen, says that there is a spectrum of political parties who signed the coalition agreement that has been established. But we only saw 6. Are there other parties in Johannesburg who are part of this? For example, some of the community-based parties or regional local parties?
Definitely there are parties. In Johannesburg, we managed to pull together 10 political parties to get us to the magic number of 136, which gives us a 50% plus 1 majority, which is needed to pass things like budgets and big items through council. So some of the smaller parties that you did not see are parties like the ATM. The UIM came later on to also sign the agreement for Johannesburg. The APC, which always works very closely with the ATM. Al Jamaa is also part of it. I think those are the 4 that you may have missed in the original agreement.
Yeah. What do you make of these agreements? By the way, when are they going to be made public? Because that's part of the commitment that these coalition agreements will be made public.
I thought that happened already immediately after the press briefing. I'm not aware that people have not received them. I'll follow up and see what's the hold at. But the agreement, yes, was that they would be made public. All
right. Maybe they've just not reached me yet, but I'm sure if they are out there, we'll certainly search and look for them. But what makes these particular agreements in place successful for you compared to, of course, the past experience?
Well, you know, the past experience was pretty ad hoc. I think it was unexpected that we would end up in a coalition government. So we were unprepared largely. And yes, we entered into agreements, but we didn't take care of many things that should be taken care of in an agreement of this nature. There were many conversations that were never had. And we learned the hard way because our coalition didn't last. I mean, there were lots of problems. And as you know, 3 years later, the mayor resigned and the whole thing collapsed. So we took those learnings and we put them into this current agreement. We made sure that it covers everything that we believe is needed to make such an agreement hold and for the full 5 years, because the whole idea behind this is to stabilize our council. So from looking at priorities, for instance, you know, in line with the legislative mandate of a local government, we made sure that each priority is outlined in the agreement, but in broad terms, because the context in Johannesburg is completely different from the context in Tshwane. Also, just in terms of values and principles, those are also clearly outlined, the values of good governance, zero tolerance to corruption, transparency, honesty, all clearly outlined in the coalition agreement. Also, just in terms of our governance framework, so a joint caucus, for instance, portfolio caucuses, an oversight committee which will be made up of national leadership. Those are some of the detail in the coalition agreement, as well as how we're going to be dealing with conflict. So it's quite comprehensive, and it's really the type of guide we need to keep this government together for the full 5 years.
Yeah. Mayor Williams, always, I suppose, on a majority side, as far as Tshwane is concerned, you are always going to be in a majority government with just even the 6 partners. But I'm sure you also have incorporated some of the other smaller parties into this particular arrangement. What will ensure that the DA, for example, Action SA and other parties act in the best interest of citizens and not the parties themselves?
Well, look, we've needed 108 votes to get to 50% plus 1. That meant we needed to pull in 5, with the DA, 5 parties altogether. We got an additional party on board, the IFP, that gives us 109 votes. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I don't have an adversarial approach in council. I always seek consensus, and that's the way I governed the 12 months before the elections. So we will still proceed to seek consensus in council, despite the fact that we have a majority in council.
You are not, as you put it, necessarily a new broom. You've been there for 12 months already and almost sussed out what the priority areas would need to be coming into this new administration. What will be your focus?
Look, what we've done is we put a 10-point plan together. While we were placed under administration, we knew what was happening in the city, that the city's finances were degrading, services were degrading. So we put a 10-point plan together that concentrates on pulling the financial situation of the city around, changing the financial situation. We need to find more funds to invest in infrastructure. You saw the electrical outages that we had in Tshwane. And then also the delivery of basic services, that's non-negotiable. So on Friday, I'm already restarting my war room again so that I can check the data, see the numbers, and see where we need to improve.
Now, I see the ANC releasing a statement that quite a number of their councillors have been incorporated, for example, in the portfolio committee chairs for Ekurhuleni. I think counting here close to 6 or 7 of them, 8 maybe, that have been incorporated in Ekurhuleni. Have you incorporated some in your portfolio committees?
Look, what we've done, portfolio committees was also part or were also part of the coalition negotiations. So of the 16, we've got 10 portfolio committees and 6 standing committees. So of those, 4 will be filled by FF+, 4 will be filled by Action SA, and 1 by ACDP, and 7 of the committees will then be filled by candidates from the DA. So no, we haven't offered any of the chairpersons of the committees to other opposition parties. And
yourself, Dr. Phalatse?
We've got all the members of the coalition agreement. As I said, we've got 10 in total in Johannesburg, and as you know, in terms of the executive, we have 10 positions, 4 that went to the Democratic Alliance, 3 to Action SA, 1 to IFP, 1 to the Freedom Front Plus, and 1 to the ACDP. Now, that's only 5 political parties represented on the executive side of council. The balance of the 10 or the other 5 will then be represented on the oversight side of council through portfolio committees. Although some of the parties in the executive will also get chairperson positions, we make sure that the other 5 definitely get chairperson positions so that we maintain stability and we have a good and strong oversight mechanism within the coalition agreement itself. We've not offered any to the ANC. We're already 10 parties. We're already quite a lot. So I think we're as inclusive as we can, given the circumstances.
Yeah. Do you not believe that that would probably enhance the decision-making process if you're able to make those jointly with some of those probably who are in opposition to you?
Well, when it comes to big decisions like budgets, for instance, we will be inclusive, regardless of whether you're a part of the coalition agreement or not. So if you look at a party like the ANC, for instance, they have quite a lot of wards in Johannesburg, and those wards need services from this government. So the representatives that those wards have elected need to be their voice, and those voices need to be heard in the decision-making processes. So no, we're not going to exclude people when we make budgets. I mean, if you look at the last budget, we also voted with the ANC. They were in charge. We made inputs into their budget, and we voted with them to pass the budget because we've got wards as well. And that's the spirit in which we're going to continue with this. Even outside of the coalition agreement, we will continue to be collaborative, consultative, and get as many inputs as possible from other political parties.
All right, let's take a break. We come back. Your inputs for the executive mayors tonight. If you do have your comments, send them through 072-110-5584. Tweet us tonight at Newzroom405. They'll be outlining some of their detailed action plans. And of course, we hope to have them back in 100 days to see how far they have gone with those plans. In Focus continues for you in a moment. Stay with us. I'm back, and you're live with us tonight on In Focus with the executive mayors of Johannesburg as well as Tshwane Mayor Dr. Mpho Phalatse and Mayor Randal Williams. Mayor Phalatse, I saw this headline that was doing the rounds, and I'm sure you saw it yourself. Dr. Phalatse, Mayor of the city of Johannesburg, adamant to protect an anti-poor stance towards the electricity situation for the people of Soweto. How do you respond to that? I think probably that would be one of the priority issues that have got you occupied even as you come into office.
Well, that's, first of all, a misrepresentation of facts. You cannot say that when a mayor of a city like Johannesburg says that residents who can afford to pay for electricity must pay for it, that is an anti-poor stance. When that mayor has also made it clear that the city has what we call the expanded social package, which is a package of rebates and subsidies, including free basic electricity, which is made available to the poor or the indigent or anyone who says they can't afford. All that we're saying is that anybody who can't afford must register for ESP. You cannot decide you're going to connect illegally to the grid, or you're going to bypass meters or purchase power from illegal vendors. Those are illegal acts and they must stop. You've got the option of registering to access free basic electricity legally, and that's what anybody who can't afford needs to do. So that is definitely a misrepresentation of facts. And I've seen, there's a propaganda machine that's been working overtime in the last 2 weeks around this issue, which is really sad because we're trying to change a culture of non-payment for services by people who can afford so that we can have adequate revenue to take care of our city and our residents. They are ultimately the beneficiaries of whatever cent comes into our coffers.
Yeah. How are you going to respond? I heard in the news that the community, as we speak, will be sitting in a big meeting to outline their program of action to, of course, respond to the fact that they gave you an ultimatum to today, or gave Eskom the ultimatum to switch the lights back on, failing which, of course, they're saying they're going to up the ante, so to speak, in as far as their street protest is concerned.
Look, let's go back to what's going on here. Eskom is a state-owned entity. It's not a municipal-owned entity. And so, politically, Eskom reports to the Minister of Public Enterprise and to the President of the country. Those kinds of concessions or any kinds of financial decisions at a political level need to be taken by the political leaders who actually have authority within the entity. I have no such authority. All I can do is play a mediating role, which is what I've been doing between the residents and Eskom to find out exactly where they're not finding each other. I believe that I've done my part and I've played it well. I believe that the payment rates have actually improved ever since I got involved in all of this. So Eskom is quite happy to see that people are coming forward to pay. But equally, this has been an opportunity for us as a municipality to communicate the message that people must pay for services. The residents of Johannesburg, regardless of where you live, are the same and they need to be treated equally and fairly. There's no pockets of land that are going to be treated special or over and above the rest of the city. Every other ratepayer in Johannesburg pays their rates, and anybody who can't afford is registered for ESP, and the same should happen in Soweto.
Yeah. Finally, on that matter, and we'll let it go, the people of Diepkloof in particular are disputing this statistic, right? We had Eskom on, and they say out of the 700, right, only 20% are paying and 80% are not paying at this particular point. And they are saying we challenge the city to come and do a proper audit, and they'll find that those numbers are actually not so. Are you willing to do that?
Well, if they want City Power to get involved, City Power can certainly get involved. But again, I think we need to go back to what I've just said. This is a relationship between a state-owned entity and its customers, which is the residents of Soweto. And between the two of them and their political leadership, it needs to be sorted out. If they want to involve the city, what I can say is that the city is working on a plan to take over Eskom supply areas in Johannesburg, and that plan is unfolding, and we will begin to see the fruits in about 4 months. In the meantime, in terms of switching on the electricity in the now, there needs to be concessions given from both ends. Residents who can pay must pay, and Eskom must see how to meet the rest of the people halfway. We will continue to make ESP registration available to make sure that those who qualify are then accessing free basic electricity, because we do pass on benefits to Eskom residents, Eskom customers as well.
Yeah. Mayor Williams, as far as the financial health situation of the city of Tshwane, how are you planning to raise that revenue? I mean, it is not a secret that we are in an economy that is not doing so well. People are not employed. We've got the COVID-19 virus that we are dealing with, and many people have not been able really to pay for their services.
Look, what we find in the city of Tshwane, yes, that's correct. A lot of people lost their jobs. But we also found what the mayor of Joburg has referred to, that despite the fact people have the ability to pay, people refuse to pay. And the problem is with when you have a post-consumption system where people first consume electricity and then not pay for it afterwards, it places a heavy burden on the municipality. Because remember, we don't generate the electricity. We buy the electricity from Eskom. So we have to pay our Eskom accounts. So if some of the residents do not pay, it means we have less funds available to pay Eskom, and we have to find the money from somewhere else. But what we've done since we got into office November last year, we've put stringent financial measures in place. For example, we've enhanced revenue collection. There was 1 month which was a low month for the administrators, where they collected 2.2 billion rands. We've improved revenue collection. The best month we had was September, where we collected 3.5 billion rands. And we were really working on maintaining that, and in fact, moving up revenue collection to over 4 billion a month. Unfortunately, we now have the elections period that required the politicians to campaign. And we sort of let our eye off the ball, because we started relying more on officials, and unfortunately officials went back to their old habits. Yeah. And so we now have to restart improving revenue collection again. Also, what we're doing, we're tightening our belts. We have our adjustments budget coming up in January, February. So there we're going to cut down on projects, cut down on expenditure, cut down on luxuries if there are any luxuries left, not something which is a necessity. Like, we don't compromise on basic service delivery that we need to deliver to residents. Yeah. The filling of potholes, fixing street lights, cutting grass. I've seen it's degraded in the city of Tshwane, so I need to get that up and running again. And that I will do in my war room on Friday, where I look at the numbers of basic service delivery.
Yeah. I hope Hammanskraal is part of what you need to be looking at as far as the water situation is concerned.
We never stopped. Remember, Hammanskraal, there were two issues. There was the Themba water treatment plant and also the Rooiwal wastewater treatment plant. Now, the Themba water treatment plant, we started rebuilding and expanded Themba water treatment plant. We increased the capacity from 60,000 to 120,000 kiloliters. 2019, it took us 2 years. We finished the project. We've got a brand new water treatment plant. The problem is the water treatment plants draw waters from dams that unfortunately get waters from rivers that are being polluted by the Rooiwal wastewater treatment plant. So we already started in 2018 with phase 1 in refurbishing the Rooiwal wastewater treatment plant. You must remember, these are our wastewater treatment plants that come from the Tshwane era. So these plants were not built to take care of the population growth that took place in the Hammanskraal area. So the plant totally ran out of capacity. It was first reported that the plant ran out of capacity in 1996. And there were council reports since 2004 that the plant needed to be upgraded. So we started in 2018 with phase 1. We're completing phase 1 in October next year. Then we're starting phase 2 and phase 3. And we're engaging with the National Minister of Water Affairs, and we're looking at funding phase 2 and 3 to the tune of 3 billion rands. So Hammanskraal is ongoing.
Mayor Phalatse, are you going to be continuing with the project of your predecessor, who is now your coalition partner, of infrastructure spend in the city, literally talking about turning the city of Johannesburg into a construction site to deal with also high-density housing and to deal with dilapidated buildings?
Well, if we're talking about infrastructure, we found an infrastructure backlog of around 200 billion rands in 2016 when we were in government, and we immediately started the process of turning that situation around. Those projects will continue. The reason for our water outages, our electricity outages, our broken down roads is because of poor investment in infrastructure over the years. We're going to be changing that, and we will be scaling up considerably in terms of what we invest in infrastructure. But we also realize that we're limited in our resources as government, and that we need to open up for greater participation by the private sector to help us meet some of those needs. There's quite an appetite in the private sector, and we have decided that we're going to be opening Johannesburg up for business so that they can help us meet the needs of our residents. In terms of the development planning space, yes, even the project that we started in 2016 of reclaiming buildings in the inner city, for instance, and giving them to the private sector for redevelopment so they can be made available for social housing for our people, those projects will definitely continue. As you recall, we had identified about 500 buildings, and only about 154 of those had been handed over. We still have a long way to go, and we'll make sure that there's follow through with that as well. But we're looking at different modalities of providing housing solutions to our people, including giving them stands that are serviced with water, electricity, and pollution facilities, and allowing them to build their own houses. In terms of densification, that is definitely a direction we will be taking. But when you densify, you need to take into consideration the infrastructure needs, because when you increase the population, exactly what Mayor Randal was talking about, without taking into consideration the fact that there's services that are required to support the growth in population, then you're going to run into other sorts of problems like constant outages when people connect illegally or when there's an overload in the system. So we're going to make sure there is a development that's comprehensive so that we don't run into any challenges.
As soon as you were elected mayor, one of the first instructions you issued was the discontinuation, or at least the suspension in the interim, of filling vacancies. Now, the 2020 report from the COCTA and urban planning team, they say there's a 20% vacancy rate at senior management level in Gauteng municipalities. How do you find the situation in the city of Johannesburg?
Well, the reason we did that is because, A, we did not have political leadership. I mean, MMCs were only sworn in yesterday. I was alone, and there was no way in a complex institution like the city of Johannesburg that I could have oversight, proper oversight over the filling of senior positions. As you know, we placed a moratorium on assistant director positions and above, and those are crucial, very strategic positions where we need people who are fit for purpose so that they can help us take the city forward. What we were waiting for is for the arrival of MMCs. They are here now. They've been sworn in. I had my first official meeting with them today. We'll be spending the whole of next week in a planning and strategic session looking at how we're going to be turning the city around, and then, of course, we will then begin to fill those vacancies. It's important to fill vacancies, but you need to fill them with the right people. You need to do away with cater deployment and all kinds of corruption in the recruitment space. And for that to happen, you need proper political leadership to do the oversight that's required.
Okay, I'll give you both 40 seconds. Two quick questions coming through. Let's begin with you, Mayor Phalatse. My question is for Dr. Mpho. What are her intentions towards the city of Johannesburg, and what type of strategies would she implement to improve the lack of service delivery from the previous administration?
Well, I've outlined 7 pillars, which are a framework which we will use with the new multi-party government now. We'll make inputs from all the various political parties, all the various MMCs from the different political parties into that framework, which looks at, number 1, basic service delivery, number 2, safety and security, number 3, being a pro-poor city, 4 being a business-friendly city, 5 being an inclusive city, 6 being a well-run city through e-governance systems, and lastly being a smart city, making sure that everyone is included as we move forward in this COVID dispensation where many of us are having to function remotely. So that's the broad framework that we will then plug all our plans and strategies and ideas from our different manifestos into as the multi-party government. Part of the reason why we're having this week-long induction and strategic planning session with all the MMCs is so that we can be on the same page while we constitute those plans and strategies. What we presented during the campaign were plans of a single political party, and now we need to integrate everything into one and make sure that there's proper representation.
Now, Williams, here's one for you. Can the Mayor of Tshwane give us an idea of how they will address the continuous cable theft resulting in unplanned power failures in Tshwane?
Look, what we're looking at is to introduce technology. You must remember, Tshwane is quite, geographically, it's a huge area. Tshwane is, the size of Tshwane is 6,300 square kilometers. It's impossible to have guards everywhere. So what we're looking at is to introduce technology. For example, putting technology in the ground, where when people start digging, alarms will go off in control rooms. We're also looking at trying to work with manufacturers. It's still going to take some time to see if we can't build in tracker chips into the copper cables, so that we can trace who are the scrap dealers buying the copper, so that we can cut off that demand. So there are various initiatives that we want to introduce.
We'll have you back in 100 days. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming through and sharing your plans with us tonight here on In Focus.